Welcome back to our discussion, Rethinking Security for the DoD Cloud and Tactical Edge, sponsored by Microsoft on Federal News Radio, 1500 AM and federalnewsradio.com. Our guest today is Susie Adams, Chief Technology Officer for Microsoft Federal, and I'm your moderator, Jared Serbu. And Susie, let's pick up the discussion we were starting to have on cloud security just before we took the break. And you mentioned virtual estate and that DoD needs to start to look at things differently. Why? Tell me why we need to look at things differently.
So when we look at where we're going just as an industry today, and you know the challenges there. Before, you know, when we looked at protecting our assets, we were really protecting our assets that lived in our data center. We knew, you know, where our data lived. We knew the configuration of our machines. We could touch them, right? We could go in and turn them on and off. We could disconnect from the internet. Right? In this new world that we live in, it really is a virtual estate where you're connecting to devices that could live anywhere, to applications that might live in any cloud. And now your virtual estate, you know, you have to manage all that. How do you know what's happening in each of these environments? How do you collect telemetry from each of these environments? And then how do you make sense of that telemetry to know if something bad is happening? And so when we look at this new world, really the security paradigm has changed, right? So the new security paradigm really is all about identity, right, as the new firewall and devices as the new edge. And we say identity as the new firewall because if you can protect your data and secure your data so that only known people with valid identities, right, can access it, and you've kind of solved your challenge of protecting your digital estate. Because now you're protecting the data regardless of where that lives, right, regardless of the device it lives in, right? And as long as that particular person has a valid credential and it's a multi-factor credential, right, you should feel good about the protection of that data. And that's a very I will say that most security professionals, when you talk like this, get extremely nervous. Right? They want to physically hold it. They want to look at that network and telemetry and NetFlow data. They want to be able to read those reports. And what we're telling them to do is say, look, this is a whole new world. You're going to have to get all the telemetry and all the signal from all these sources and applications, and then use the big data analytics and machine learning capabilities of hyperscale cloud to help you manage, right, this world.
And that CISO nervousness that you mentioned, I think, is based largely on the fact that you're putting a lot of your eggs there in the identity basket. So you've got to have very high level of assurance in whatever identity mechanism you're using. So are we there yet, where we can have that level of confidence?
I think we are. You know, when you look at how people manage identity today, most people are using Active Directory, Windows Active Directory, and we've extended that capability into the cloud with Azure Active Directory. And so now, you know, most of our customers, when they begin to use cloud services, actually keep their directory, their authoritative directory on premise, and then they federate to the cloud. To Azure Active Directory. And then from there, they can be assured that the authoritative directory and credentials actually live on premise and behind their firewall, but yet that when they're using the cloud service, they're using those credentials in a secure fashion to access their data, regardless of where it lives. And so I think we are there. I think the challenge is, you know, helping people and security folks understand kind of the differences, right, and managing that world. And some of the, you know, unique differences are you now have access to a lot of application level data. For example, I think the example I gave in the earlier segment where how do you know if somebody logged on to a system, to an application from two different countries within 10 minutes of one another, right, with valid credentials? If you can track that and be notified of that and set policy that says, Susie, I saw that Susie logged on from these two countries, it's impossible. Right, I'm going to automatically remove her access to all systems. I'm going to automatically wipe all her devices, right, and then tell her to contact, you know, the help desk. These things are real capabilities today. This isn't, you know, rocket science. It is something that's 20 years out. These capabilities exist today, and I think what we're seeing now is, especially in the federal and the DoD space, is people really start to look at these technologies and try to incorporate them into their environments.
And obviously we know that the Defense Department is looking for a successor to its Common Access Card as sort of the master credential that people use. in whatever that successor technology ends up being, what needs to factor in to enable all of the capabilities that you just talked about?
Yeah, absolutely. It's no secret that, having a CAC card attached to your phone really isn't convenient to be able to access critical data or to any device, whether you're in the field or otherwise, to do this. And derived credentials are really the solution to this problem. And there are a variety of different technologies out there for derived credentials. But for example, Microsoft supports a variety of different derived credentials. And so we are, our goal really is to get rid of the password altogether. If you look at where we're going, there's been many articles on, do we really need passwords anymore, with that cheat sheet with all your different passwords somewhere. I think the answer is, no, we need to move away from passwords. We need to move away from just having a physical card that you have to insert into a card reader. And we really need to take advantage of derived credential capabilities on the variety of different device platforms out there. And it's not just a Microsoft technology. This is something that's being adopted by all the major hardware and software vendors.
This is something that I think, though, that people who have gotten used to the CAC card have difficulty wrapping their minds around. If I don't have a physical token and a PIN, then this is the thing that tells me that it tells the IT system that I really am me. What replaces that level of assurance?
Could be a phone. Could be it could be your fingerprint. It could be your voice, right? If we look at all the different technology that's out there, for example, today, if I go and access my email, it will make me multi-factor authenticate. And instead of just calling me, we purchased a company called Phone Factor years ago, calling me, right, and having me respond with a code, like you do with RSA. It now asks me for my thumbprint. Right. And so when we look at those types of technologies, obviously, right, depending on the sensitivity of the data, some of these technologies would not be appropriate. But the capability exists and it exists today. And so I think what we're seeing now, if you look at NIST putting out guidance for derived credentials across the board in the civilian space, and now DoD looking at how do we leverage derived credentials and how do we do so depending on the classification of the data, I think we're going to see the adoption of derived credentials across the board in the federal government become mainstream probably in the next several years.
And that's a good segue to talk a little bit more about the tactical environment that we were getting into a little bit earlier, because the CAC card is not a great solution for that. I mean, try to get a replacement CAC card in the middle of Afghanistan when you're locked out of your machine or your CAC card is broken. All of the technologies that you just talked about are much more suitable to that, especially when you may be accessing multiple clouds in that on that tactical edge.
So when we talk about multiple clouds, we're seeing this across the board already. People are using Salesforce, they're using Amazon, they're using Azure, they have Office 365, they have data that's hosted behind their firewall, right? A lot of people call, we look at the definition of hybrid cloud, the definition of multi-cloud. Really, the world we live in is going to consist of data behind your firewall living on traditional systems, data on converged systems, right? Like an Azure stack, data in Azure, data in Salesforce, in Amazon, right, in Office 365, in Google, right? We're going to see these digital estates grow based on the particular solutions leveraging the best of breed capabilities in each of the clouds. And this is just reality. I mean, if you look, I think Gartner and a few other analysts have put white papers out on this saying this is where the industry is going. This is not something that's specific to the federal government. This is where industry is, going as a whole. And so what I think you're going to see is the ability to be able to manage these environments. And that's really what's missing right now. How do I manage my virtual digital estate that consists of, solutions running in all these clouds? How do I know what's going on in Amazon and Azure and in Office 365 on premise all at once in a single pane of glass? And that's really the part that's missing here. And I think this is where all these security tools that are taking advantage of the hyperscale and pieces of the cloud and machine learning and big data analytics are really going to help, right? The adoption of the multi-cloud kind of approach to things. And I really don't think it's that far away. I really think that in the next 2 years, you're going to see an explosion of the capabilities to be able to manage those types of digital estates.
So the interesting thing about everything you just said is you're describing it as this is really a permanent state of affairs where for the foreseeable future, people are going to be operating in multiple clouds. It's not a waypoint to some other end state until you're ready to migrate everything into a single cloud platform.
Absolutely. I mean, if it goes back to the years where people would say, I really am not going to put all my eggs in one basket. Now, we all know that there are only a few hyperscale cloud providers that are out there today, and it's difficult for a new one to enter the market because of the amount of capital that's needed to actually do so. Right. So I really think that what you're going to see people do is leverage the best of breed technologies and then, use the competition card to get other folks to try to grab their business.
And as far as weaving all of those clouds together, does that need to be done by government expertise, which seems like something the government would need to grow, or do you envision that being more of a managed service that another contractor provides?
I think it's a combination of both. I think there needs to be an understanding by the federal workforce of how this works, what tools to use, how do you manage your virtual estate, how do you secure your virtual estate. How do you look at the different telemetry capabilities of each of the clouds that are out there? How do you judge the security capabilities of each of the providers? But I do think that a big role for the systems integrator community is going to be helping federal agencies manage those digital estates. And then I think that you're also going to see the tools, like I said, really explode to be able to do this. And to help not only federal government agencies, but the industry as a whole manage this new world we live in. And do it in a very different fashion than we're doing today.
You don't have to name specific clients if you don't want to, but I'm always interested in anecdotes. Are there customers in DoD that you've worked with that have started down this path a little bit and started to weave together some of these multi-cloud architectures?
Across the board, I don't think you can name a single entity that is only using one commercial cloud. Mm-hmm. I can't off the top of my head. Whether it's they're using Office 365 in Amazon, or they're using Salesforce, or they have some things in Google.
But the question is, right? Are they playing together, or are they just doing discrete, different things? Completely unrelated mission spaces.
I think from an architecture perspective, you're probably not going to see a single mission critical app leverage 2 or 3 clouds at the same time, and for a variety of different architecture reasons. How are you going to talk? That could be a lot of network chattiness going across, which costs money. Right? And so from an architecture perspective, I think at an application level, it's probably not completely practical to leverage multiple clouds, although we have seen some apps where it completely makes sense to do so. So I think you need to look at it on an application by application basis. But aside from each application, I think there's no reason that data can't live in multiple clouds, or applications or agencies can't take advantage of the capabilities of multiple clouds to better meet their mission.
And Susie, just to wrap us up here, you've said a couple times throughout our conversation that a lot of the technologies and capabilities that we've been talking about are within a year or two away. Where do you see DoD specifically going in the next couple of years?
Well, I think, when we look at the capabilities today, the capabilities are absolutely there today to do a lot of what I talked about right now. I mean, I think the tools that will come about are, how do you actually manage this digital virtual estate as it grows?
Right.
There are tools out there today to help you do this, but I think you're going to see an explosion in those tools. Yeah, we're really excited that DoD has decided to accelerate their move to the cloud. We think that there's absolutely no reason they can't move even mission critical apps to the cloud today. We see industries like the financial industry doing that, the banking industry on a global basis. And so we really think that it is a great time for DoD to accelerate. I think the pieces of this that really need to evolve is, how do we actually take hyperscale computing, right, that's happening in a cloud data center, and leverage those capabilities so that we can give better informed data to the warfighter and at that tactical edge. And I think that's the exciting part of this. How do we use technologies like Internet of Things, machine learning, big data analytics to be able to increase the capabilities of the warfighter, right? Almost real time, using a variety of the new technologies, and do so in a secure manner. And I think that's really, I think what this acceleration of the cloud is really going to help DoD with long term.
All right, that's a good place to leave it. I want to thank our guest, Susie Adams, the Chief Technology Officer at Microsoft Federal, for joining us on our program, Rethinking Security for the DoD Cloud and Tactical Edge. Thanks a lot for doing this, Susie.
Absolutely. Glad to be here.
And I'm Jared Serbu on Federal News Radio, 1500 AM and federalnewsradio.com. For more on this discussion, visit federalnewsradio.com and search DoD Cloud.